As the country looks towards the future, some pertinent issues include what happens to women's rights, economic opportunities, safety and political influence, and what kind of society are we building for the next generation. In episode 3 of When Women Rise, we look beyond the present to explore possible futures for South African women through the work of Indlulamithi South Africa Scenarios. Researchers use different scenarios to imagine where the country could be headed and what each of these futures could mean for women. Project Lead Xolelwa Kashe-Katiya explains that the thinking behind these scenarios and why women could be among those most affected by the choices South Africa makes today. Episodes 1 and 2 are available now on SABC Plus as well as the SABC News YouTube channel. You can check them out.
My name is Lead Xolelwa Kashe-Katiya. I am the project leader of Indlulamithi South Africa Scenarios. Indlulamithi SA Scenarios, first of all, is inspired by the giraffe, because Indlulamithi is the Nguni word for giraffe, which literally translates to above the trees. So the name of the giraffe in Nguni it means that, and we adopted that metaphor to look above the trees, because when we do scenarios, we are concerned with the future. So to actually look towards the future, you have to look above the trees, which are the noise and the contestation and the political shifts that are happening at the current moment. So to not be distracted by the present, you have to emulate the giraffe and look above the trees. To build scenarios, we start off with variables, which are discrete statements about the future of the country. And therein, there are elements or statements that speak directly to the condition of women in South Africa. For example, the variable that we have currently for the 2035 scenarios is that women will continue being impacted by patriarchy and as a result continue being most vulnerable to economic conditions, but also violence. So women are one of the categories that inform what we would define as vulnerable groups, who then would be most vulnerable to whatever scenario emerges in the country. So the major scenarios that we've come up with is the Hadida scenario, which is a very noisy country where there's lots of recrimination, finger pointing, a loud democracy that we're already starting to see emerge, especially in the political spaces. But I mean, in the recent past, it's also been in the public domain, whether it's on social media platforms or just in public. We are this loud democracy where we are continuously pointing fingers at each other, whether we're pointing at white people, the black people, the foreigners, the men, the women, the history, you know, apartheid, and so on. So those are the features of that Hadida scenario, which is as loud as the Hadida bird, which is the loudest bird in the continent. The second scenario is what we've named vulture culture scenario. And again, we're inspired by yet another bird, which is a vulture. And that is a scavenger, a very skilled scavenging bird that is very quick to, you know, identify any carcass or potential feast. And they will push away everyone else, all the other scavengers, because, you know, it's quite large, and for whatever it is that it deems as its own spoils. So here we're trying to create a metaphor for a South Africa that is scavenging itself, but also there's other scavengers that are always waiting along the wings to scavenge this carcass that has become the nation. The third scenario is what we've called the weaver work scenario, which is inspired by the weaver bird. And these are these small yellow birds that live in communal spaces. They'll build massive nests where hundreds of bird families live, or it would be discrete nests, but still around a single tree you'll have several of those, like of those weaver birds. So there it's about a cooperation nation where in different parts of society come together for the greater good of the country. Now, what's interesting is that across all these three scenarios is that we have coalition governments, because we understand that going forward, South Africa is going to be governed by coalition governments, but then they differ in their nature. In the Hadida allowed recrimination nation, there we have a type of GNU of sorts that is made up of different political parties that don't quite agree. So everything is always negotiated, so there is strife there. In the second scenario, which is the vulture culture, we have an authoritarian and populist coalition that forms, which starts shutting down on freedoms, whether it's freedom of expression, freedom of productive rights when it comes to women, or media freedom where media is concerned. And then the last scenario, the weaver work, therein the coalition is actually informed by a grassroots movement that had ejected whatever government had taken shape in the mid-2020s. So by the time we get to 2035, we've had this upswell of social movements. The country was out on the streets, and it eventually ejected that the governing formation, and a new coalition forms, which is led by social movements, but also it is informed by a government that listens. So like the way women are affected by the three scenarios then would differ. For example, in the weaver work, we do know that women tend to be more involved in civil society movements, all those social movements. We've seen in the Fees Must Fall that was led by women. We've seen the total shutdown. So there's this emergence and groundswell of women that are leading these movements. So there's potential that where that upswell happens and a formation of a more collaborative and cooperative coalition, that women would probably lead in that weaver work scenario. Whereas in the vulture culture, which is now the cannibalizing, scavenging nation, you would obviously see women being affected the most there because they are once again vulnerable. So if you've got an authoritarian government that's clamping down on rights, so what happens then to, reproductive rights? What happens to, gender rights? What happens to, rights to protest, and so on? So you would see then women would be most affected, as they would be most, so they would be more disadvantaged in that vulture culture with this very authoritarian coalition. Whereas in the first one, in the Hadida one, so again you would see the divides in terms of our inequality. Once again, the inequality, it's not just about economic inequality, there's also gender inequality. So those divides would be expressed in terms of that recrimination and bickering and loud nation, which is the Hadida nation. So I think what we need to focus on is really that variable, which I mentioned in the beginning, which is that we know that whatever scenario, there will always be this continued marginalization of women as a result of patriarchy that is endemic in our society, and the symptoms thereof would be, the exclusion of women, it would be violence against women, and so on. It's so interesting how when we built the scenarios, one of the scenarios that we started with actually ends with a woman being inaugurated, and those were the 2030 scenarios that we had launched in 2017. And the unfortunate part is that this is part of the storyline for the worst case scenario, which we are in. We had written those scenarios along, the metaphors were dance moves. So the worst case scenario was the Gwara Gwara, wherein we have a state of lawlessness by 2030. And the country actually implodes. It's informed by these ruptures that become endemic, and we literally nearly burn the whole country down. And when it rises from the ashes after the 2029 elections, we see a woman president being inaugurated, and someone who could have been part of those early hashtag movements, Rhodes Must Fall, a younger, version of a president than what we used to. But unfortunately, it's someone who has to now build the country from scratch after we've burnt it all down, which is quite sad that the only scenario where a woman becomes president is after we've ruined everything. And we finish off that scenario with her delivering a speech that old men did this.